Somebody punched Caitlin Clark in the throat on live television, and for 7 days, she said nothing, not one word. Then the cameras caught her walking off the court, and what happened next split the entire basketball world in half. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why 8 Olympians from 3 different countries just came out and publicly demanded the WNBA protect this woman, and why a reporter covering her games says she is now afraid to show up to work. Before we get into it, hit that subscribe button. This channel breaks down what's really happening in the Caitlin Clark story, faster and deeper than anyone else covering it, and you don't want to miss where this goes. Let's start from the beginning. Caitlin Clark walked into the WNBA as the most hyped rookie in the history of women's basketball. Record-breaking scorer at Iowa. Television numbers no franchise had ever seen. And from the very first week, something strange started happening. Every time she stepped on the court, the physical play around her got harder. Hard fouls, extra contact after the whistle, trash talk. It happened so often, so early, that even her own teammates started noticing a pattern. And here's the part that made it complicated. When people started asking, why does this keep happening to her? The conversation didn't stay about basketball. It became about race, about jealousy, about whether the rest of the league resented the fact that one white rookie from Iowa was bringing in more attention and more money than players who had been grinding for years. Some veterans like Jameli Hill pushed back hard on that idea, saying this was normal basketball competitiveness and nothing more. Others disagreed completely, and Clark herself, sitting in interview after interview, kept saying the same thing, that she was confused by how controversial people made her out to be when all she was doing was playing the game. But then it stopped being about hard fouls and trash talk. In June, during a game against the Phoenix Mercury, veteran forward Alyssa Thomas made contact with Caitlin Clark's throat on camera, in front of a sold-out arena and a national television audience. And Clark, the same player who talks to reporters after almost every single game, just disappeared. No press conference, no statement, no social media post, nothing. For an entire week, the biggest star in the sport went completely silent, and nobody knew why. Now here's where it gets interesting, because Alyssa Thomas didn't stay quiet. She went out and criticized Clark for not speaking up about the incident, while at the same time saying that players across the league were receiving threats and that their lives were being put at risk because of the way this story was being covered. So you had one player accusing another of staying silent, while simultaneously saying the entire situation had spiraled into something dangerous for everyone involved. Keep that in your head, because it's going to matter later in this video when we get to what a WNBA reporter said about her own safety. When Clark finally broke her silence, she didn't do it quietly. She addressed the incident directly and admitted something most superstars never admit on camera: that she has feelings, that she gets frustrated, that she gets sad, that all the noise around her actually affects her as a real person, not just a highlight reel. That single moment of honesty went further than any scripted statement could have, and then, almost like she wanted to answer every single critic at once, Caitlin Clark did something no one expected. She went out against the Seattle Storm and dropped 45 points with 10 assists in a single game. Let that sink in for a second. 45 points, 10 assists. That made her the very first player in WNBA history to hit 40-plus points and 10-plus assists in the same game. Just the 10th player ever to score 45 points in a single WNBA contest, period. And she did this while playing on a minutes restriction, recovering from a back injury, refusing to come out of the game because, in her own words, she felt too good and didn't want to lose. This is the moment I need you to remember, because everything that happens next in this story only makes sense once you understand what this performance did to the conversation around her. Because here's the thing about elite athletes who get doubted, who get hit, who get talked about instead of watched. The ones who are truly built different don't complain. They answer with numbers so loud that the noise around them has nowhere left to hide. That's exactly what Caitlin Clark did. But it didn't end the controversy. if anything, it turned the volume up even louder. If you've made it this far, comment CC Army below, so I know you're locked in, because what happened next got so heated that Olympic athletes from other countries felt the need to step into an American basketball story. So let's talk about the officiating, because this is where things really boiled over. Just days after that historic 45-point game, cameras caught Caitlin Clark doing something completely out of character, screaming directly in the face of a referee during a live game. Not a quiet word, not a shrug. A full, visible, emotional confrontation on the court, broadcast to millions. For a player who has spent 2 full seasons being praised for staying composed under constant physical targeting, that moment told you everything about how much pressure had actually built up underneath the surface. And it wasn't just Clark who felt it. Around that same stretch of games, this thing exploded into something much bigger than one team's locker room. 8 Olympians, across 3 different countries, came forward publicly to demand that the WNBA improve player safety and fix what they saw as inconsistent, unfair officiating, specifically around how Clark was being treated on the floor. Think about that for a second. These are elite athletes with no direct stake in the WNBA's business, no contract with Indiana, nothing to gain personally. And they still felt the situation had gotten bad enough that they needed to speak up from the outside. Now pause here, because I want you to really sit with what that means. When athletes from completely different countries, different sports federations, different competitive systems, all look at the same footage and reach the same conclusion, that's not one biased fan base talking. That's a pattern becoming impossible to ignore on a global stage. And the tension didn't stop with players and Olympians. It reached all the way up to the league office itself. During WNBA All-Star Weekend, Commissioner Cathy Engelbert stood up and addressed something that should stop every single viewer in their tracks. The harassment being directed at players had gotten so severe that the league felt forced to publicly acknowledge it. Engelbert specifically called out racism, misogyny, homophobia, harassment, and direct threats being sent to players, saying flat out that none of it belongs anywhere near the sport. That is a commissioner on a league-wide stage, admitting the problem had grown too large to manage quietly behind closed doors. And it gets worse. Around this exact same period, a reporter who regularly covers Caitlin Clark's games came forward and said she was genuinely afraid, her own words, to show up and cover a game in person because of the volume of death threats she had received simply for reporting on this story. A journalist, someone whose entire job is to sit courtside and describe what happens in a basketball game, afraid for her physical safety because of how radioactive this storyline had become online. So, now you've got a superstar getting hit on camera, Olympians demanding change from outside the league, a commissioner publicly admitting to a harassment crisis, and a reporter scared to do her job. This is not normal sports drama anymore. This is something the entire league has to reckon with. If this is pulling you in, make sure you're subscribed, because there's still one more layer to this story, and it's the part almost nobody outside hardcore WNBA fans actually understands. And it explains why Cathy Engelbert was already on thin ice before any of this Clark controversy even started boiling over. Because Caitlin Clark wasn't the first player to publicly challenge the league's leadership. Minnesota Lynx star Napheesa Collier, one of the most respected veterans in the entire league and a vice president of the Players' Union, delivered what became one of the most explosive moments in recent WNBA history. During her end-of-season press conference, Collier stood up with a prepared statement and did not hold back. She said the real threat to the league wasn't money, wasn't ratings, wasn't even missed calls. She said it was, in her words, the total lack of accountability coming from the league office. And then she went further, saying the WNBA currently has the worst leadership in the world. Think about how rare that is. A star player, a union vice president, standing in front of cameras and directly attacking the commissioner of her own league, by name, on the record. Collier didn't stop there. She revealed details from private conversations with Engelbert, claiming the commissioner had told her that only losers complain about officiating and that players should essentially be grateful for the media deal the league secured for them. Engelbert's response came just days later, calling herself disheartened by how Collier had characterized their private conversations, while insisting her commitment to the players hadn't wavered. But Engelbert also specifically and directly denied one particular claim, that she had ever said Caitlin Clark should be grateful for her off-court income because without the WNBA's platform, she supposedly wouldn't be making anything at all. Engelbert flatly said she never made those comments. Now think about what that means when you connect it back to everything else in this video. You have a commissioner already under fire from a respected veteran and union leader for allegedly dismissing player concerns. You have accusations denied but publicly made involving Caitlin Clark's name specifically. And then, just months later, the same commissioner is standing at a podium admitting the league has a harassment and safety crisis on its hands involving that very same player. This isn't a coincidence. This is one long connected storyline about a league that is growing faster than its leadership can manage, and it is dragging its biggest star straight through the middle of it. Comment below. Do you think this is really about basketball, or is this about power, money, and who actually controls the direction of the WNBA? I want to see your take before we keep going, because what comes next connects every single piece we've talked about so far. Let's talk about why this all matters so much right now, in this exact moment. Caitlin Clark did not create this storm. She showed up, she played record-breaking basketball, and the numbers around her, the ticket sales, the television ratings, the merchandise, the media rights deals, exploded almost instantly. That kind of growth puts pressure on every single part of a league that wasn't built for that scale of attention. The officiating gets scrutinized like never before. The physical play gets analyzed frame by frame by millions of fans who never watched a WNBA game before her arrival. And every disagreement, every hard foul, every technical, every locker room comment gets amplified into a national headline within hours. That's exactly what happened with Sheryl Swoopes, one of the most decorated legends in league history, who weighed in publicly on the Collier and Engelbert situation, adding even more fuel to a fire that was already burning out of control. When a legend of Swoopes' stature steps into a commissioner controversy, you know the story has stopped being about one player and started being about the entire direction of the league. And here's what makes this so fascinating to watch unfold in real time. Every side of this story has a completely different version of events. Some people believe Caitlin Clark is being targeted because of jealousy and resentment from veterans who feel overshadowed. Some people believe the physicality is simply normal, hard-nosed basketball that every rookie has to earn respect through. Some people believe the league office is failing its players across the board, and Clark's situation is just the most visible symptom of a much bigger accountability problem. And some people believe the media coverage itself has become the actual problem, blowing up ordinary basketball plays into manufactured national controversies for clicks and ratings. Here's my honest take, and you can agree or disagree with me in the comments. I don't think this is as simple as everyone hates Caitlin Clark, or everyone is jealous of Caitlin Clark. I think what you're watching is a league that grew 10 years in 10 months, and every single structure underneath it, officiating standards, player safety protocols, media relations, commissioner accountability, is straining under weight it was never designed to carry. Caitlin Clark just happens to be standing at the center of that pressure because she's the one who brought the eyeballs that created the pressure in the first place. And that's precisely why this story isn't going away anytime soon. There are ongoing conversations about the league's next collective bargaining agreement. There are ongoing questions about officiating consistency that Collier raised months before any of the Clark punch controversy even happened. There are questions about how the league protects its players, all its players, not just Clark, from online harassment that has clearly crossed the line into real credible threats against journalists and athletes alike. So where does this leave Caitlin Clark right now today? She's still on the floor. She's still putting up historic numbers even while playing through injury. She's still, according to her own words, feeling every bit of the pressure as a real person with real emotions. Not a machine, not a brand, not a headline. And she's still somehow at the absolute center of a conversation involving Olympic athletes, a WNBA commissioner, a union vice president, and reporters who say they're afraid to come to work. That's not just a basketball story anymore. That's a story about what happens when a sport gets more popular faster than its institutions can handle, and about one 24-year-old who has to live through every single bit of that growing pain in real time on national television, whether she wants to or not. Now here's the part I promised you at the very beginning of this video, the part that ties every single thread together and tells you exactly where this story is heading next. Everything you just watched, the punch, the silence, the historic response, the referee confrontation, the Olympians, the commissioner's admission, the reporter's fear, and the Collier bombshell that started cracking the league's foundation months before any of this, all of it is still unfolding right now. None of these storylines are closed. The league is still negotiating its next labor agreement. The commissioner is still facing pressure from inside her own locker rooms. And Caitlin Clark is still out there, every single game, walking directly into the middle of all of it. So here's my question for you before you go. Do you think the WNBA fixes this before it spirals further out of control? Or does this get worse before it gets better? Type your prediction in the comments because I read every single one, and I want to know what you think happens next. If this video kept you here until the end, that tells me you actually care about where this story goes. So, do me a favor and hit subscribe right now, because the next update on this is coming, and you do not want to be the last person in the comments finding out what happens next in the Caitlin Clark story.